Thanks very much, colleagues. It's June 19th. We are live from meeting room number 3 of the Duderstadt Center at the University of Michigan. I have with me my colleagues Mike Toner from Los Angeles and Dennis Johnson here with me in the studio. This is our first time recording here. We think that we're getting a little bit better at this. I'd like to say that this is roughly our 1-year anniversary of having done these videos. They're running about 30 minutes, as you can see. We still managed to get what averages out to be something on the order of 25 plus viewers. We know that Friday afternoon is not the time when everyone's around to call in, but we do like to have one open door 30-minute period where if anyone has any questions, want to work with us interactively, to kind of summarize what the week looks like, we like to keep this door open here. So we're nearly always live on a Friday afternoon from no matter where we're at. So we promised something about international standards, so let's get to it. If you go to our main blog site, remember, of course, that we have several sites that all have slightly different purposes. This was one of our original sites here. This is a site that kind of gives a broad overview of what we're doing in our annual report. But down here, I'm going to start with an article here, what I'll call, it's an unpublished article, actually. I've been a fairly well-published author, as most of you know, and I've never had a publication rejected after it was actually accepted for publication. So I tend to use this one for sentimental reasons. Every author has to have an article pulled from the presses at the last moment. This is mine. It's important to understand that our point about the way international standards develop is that there are 3 organizations in Geneva, ISO, IEC, and the ITU. It was the International Electrical Technical Commission that started. It was the first organization. I believe it was set up by one of the early pioneers, German engineers. And then, of course, the International Telecommunications Union came along somewhere in the middle 1800s, and then the International Standards Organization. So there's a lot of history on that. My point with this map, and I believe I'm going to be getting a change to this one very shortly. I'll probably mark this up differently, was that in this, we try to point out that in the global standards development system, every country has 1 vote. It's very much like our I guess it's very much like our House of Representatives, not quite, excuse me. Our Senate is set up very much like that. It's not based on population. Our House of Representatives is. The Senate tends to make adjustments for geographies in our electoral system. So it's rather much duplicated here in Geneva. So every organization has to have one organization that casts that nation's vote. In our system, it's the American National Standards Institute. What we were trying to drive at here when this article was first crafted was that we're seeing a lot of offshoring. That it's important to follow global standards of development because these organizations here, the center of gravity of economic activity has moved rather significantly. I guess on this map it would be called eastward. But actually, there are faster growing economies over on this side, obviously, and these organizations, because they're running pension fund money, tend to look for growth, and the growth is over, frankly, off this map. But still, there is what I'll call a 25 to 1 or 25 to 3 advantage. The European Union, they do have an organization called the Central Normalization Organization in Europe. And that's the group that organizes the European bloc, and of course we have Canada, United States, and Mexico here. But in general, you'll see that these companies are moving toward the center of gravity of economic activity, and that was my point simply for the electrical part. But it is an object lesson as to why our attention to standards development is important. We recently had some action on our elevator standards, and you can see that where those meetings are taking place are offshore, and that tends to favor the organizations that can afford to attend the offshore meetings. So that's a bit of a backstory. We can talk a long time about that particular configuration. I would like to just get very specific right now about what international standards we've looked at. We've looked at the better part of 10 to 15 of them. I'll briefly touch on them and try to explain why we picked this one. And then at any given time, anyone is allowed to communicate with me or Rich or Jack or any of my colleagues about where we are with them. So if we get to our homepage for this particular week, I would, if there was interaction, I would probably, if there's somebody calling in, I would probably try to defer to some of their questions. We reminded everybody here that these are intended to be informal discussions. So in any case, what you need to do, what you can do on our website here is, if you were just to hit international standards, you see the ones that we have here that we're watching. So this is a very obviously global food chains are very important, and the organization that really is the leading name globally is NSF International. We're close to them because NSF International tends to own the space in water and food safety globally. They've expanded into China, for example, more recently. They were actually founded by the University of Michigan, and so their footprint is rather large. And here we're trying to show their role in food safety management. It's important to us just because we would like to be able to. We have a significant number of food preparation enterprises in our industry, and as I try to say in elsewhere, the regulators will tend to want to inspire regulators in other nations, and so there's a tendency for these larger global policy initiatives to be conveyed to different national regulation organizations, and so it's impossible to underestimate how quickly international standard can be adopted by a particular government or political party, and then of course an agenda will be driven through them using that as a template. So there, you can talk a lot about world trade limitations and trade restrictions. That's not our we don't have time for that right now, but suffice to say that standardization does hasten trade, and so for that reason, if it hastens trade, very often it means lower prices. So okay, that's food safety. We did provide some comments on that one. Now we get into a rather sensitive area here, which tends to be in my area of expertise. It has to do with smart energy, smart grid, microgrid. These are buzzy terms that we're trying to vet and wring out in the Education and Healthcare Facilities Electrotechnology Committee. This weekend you will see. So this was founded by myself and a few other colleagues around the world. Frankly, of Italian colleagues, Canadian colleagues, and of course some colleagues here in colleagues in the United States. So the very sensitive issue here has to do with the degree to which we're watching manufacturers project their sales agenda through political pressure to hasten the evolution toward, or the economy, or the energy economy toward smart grid and microgrid. At the moment, they're rather buzzy. As you'll see, that my colleague from Ohio State University kind of agreed with me that there's a lot of disagreement among the academic community. I asked him tough questions about how much different is a cogeneration system, of which there are many in our industry. How are they different than a smart grid? And so you'll see good people disagree on that. But of course, our interest is principally in the business area. But our concern in the Electro Technology Committee is that we think that if our executive industry leaders if our industry's leaders are serious about wanting to save energy, that a migration to a smart grid may be good for public relations, but it may not be good for may not be good for your energy bill, unless of course you do different things with your balance sheets. So again, the leader of Eaton, I think they're They also have a global vision. I remember that I did bring them up. They're one of the organizations that are looking for using the International Electrotechnical Commission as a platform for projecting this migration towards smart grids. So we're not technically against it, but we do think that there are probably, we need to get our vocabulary in terms of art straight, because it may well be that if your principal concern is to save energy, your energy bill, then the first place you would go would not be to some of these smart grid and microgrid initiatives. So that'll be, you're welcome. Anyone's welcome to call into those. So those are two international standards that seem to take a lot of page space and require a lot of oxygen where the discussions occur. So now what do we have here? We have recycling road operation services. We like to remind people that it turns out concrete is the most widely used construction material, and on this particular one, how you actually recycle some of this material seems to be the subject of this particular standard. We did discuss a little bit on it. I believe we provided some comments to the U.S. tag on this one. I'm being reminded we're running out of time again. So we've been involved in the International Lights and Lighting Standard. The Germans approached the ISO, and they would like to get terms of art and the vocabulary and some definitions clarified. I feel that this is very important for our industry to follow. We're a large 40% of our lighting load, of our building electrical load, tends to be towards lighting. So again, you can see. Can I blow this up? Does it blow up? There it is. Okay. Again, this gives you a better view that Germany has an advantage here. What do you run across? 13 time zones here, I think. So these are the faster growing markets here. So not that I'm against the Germans owning this particular technology, but they can, despite our market size over here, these countries are growing. So if you want to give your industries a competitive advantage, then you want to be running the tables on that particular standard. So again, happy to talk to anyone in detail about that one. So we've been on that one since 2012. So we've had some back and forth on that. Human resource management, this is relatively new. You can tell also when it hits our radar, we try to give them a number. There's a theoretical limit of 8750, by the way, just in case anybody wants to know. We think it's reasonable to be tracking 8,760 concepts like this per year. So that much said, now we are getting engaged with the University of Texas. They have some very knowledgeable people there in standards development, and getting a vocabulary, a common vocabulary around the world about how you manage human resources is their project. This used to be a project that was run by the Society of Human Resource Management. That was then moved over to the University of Texas Medical Branch. So this is relatively new. And Lee is the leading name in that one. There are a couple other people helping him out. We're collaborating with them only to the extent of our interest being in education facilities and healthcare systems, which is the larger part of our cost structure is in the labor. So there's likely to be a fair amount of action on this in the later summer, early fall. Biotechnology, this is one of the first, again, along with lighting systems that we took an interest in. Originally, our interest in this was inspired by some language in the early drafts that seemed to give competitive advantage to research square footage offshore that didn't conform to certain safety and sustainability parameters that made the competition for researchers and research facilities equal. I can say that in a different way. If other nations have a different conception of safety and sustainability, or different priorities for those than we do, then there's a likelihood that the research would go to those nations. It's already happening now to some degree. And again, limiting our concern to simply the square footage used for research, we wanted to make sure that our larger universities, particularly, would be on a level playing field. So we've been assertive in that one, enough such that it seems as though that part seemed to have been taken out. So now it's left as largely of an academic issue. So I'm not sure if I can call that an advocacy achievement, but we took that out of the scope. So for that reason, I think that we may still have to look at biotechnology, at least the academics, but at least we've got the facilities part out of it. Okay, and I think then we come to the end here. We have engaged also, going way back to 2011, in fact, rather consistently with the international standard for energy management. Obviously, it's high on the agenda of every nation, and every nation's standards development organization has to have an energy transformation agenda, and that's what there's a broad template for that here. So I actually got the original draft of this. I was in Geneva. Many of you know that I have family in Europe, and I'm in Geneva frequently, and so I convene regularly with them. And we actually tried, when I was given the watermark copy as one of those courtesies you get when you come to visit their offices. I tried to get that in front of the International Energy Conservation Code Committee. It was not well received. It was rejected. It was received respectfully, though, I should say. But their idea here was that this suite of standards, the one that where Georgia Tech is actually the U.S. Technical Advisory, the TAG administrator, they wanted to see prescriptive requirements, and you'll see that in some of our transactions from last year. Maybe I'll get that link, that YouTube video here. But long story short, the global conception of energy management seems to be along performance lines, whereas in our building industry at the moment, the International Energy Conservation Code Committees, the International Code Council, wants to see prescriptive requirements so that they're easily verifiable by the enforcement committee, and that helps move our industries along to innovate new ways, new materials, new ways of building and designing and maintaining. So I think that's the bulk of it. That's probably a good enough place to start. I will be uploading this sometime later on, probably no earlier than this afternoon, probably no later than Monday afternoon. Again, if there's any question, you're certainly welcome to call me directly. And I think next week we may well go through our issue list. You'll notice last week that I hadn't lofted up the avoided cost opportunity video just because it was a very poor quality, and I guess 1 out of 52 videos having to be rejected for quality, especially by the guy who put them together, is probably not a bad percentage. So, but the broad contours of what we were trying to do is actually described here in this blog entry, and we will be revisiting this issue of how can we be orthodox and honest and fair about our claims of avoided cost opportunities. We're careful to use the word opportunity again, because not everyone has a mind to do some of the things that we have done here at the University of Michigan. For trying to control our costs. But they are there for the taking, and those standards were relaxed, and you're welcome to use them to your liking to manage your cost and risk. So with that, I will end this call. Any questions, Mike? Nope.
Nope, I'm good.
Great. All right. Thanks very much, and I will see you next week. Please, if you will, if you're interested in seeing our daily action, you can subscribe to our blog, and you don't have to get everything. We're really just getting started, trying to keep up the pace of things. But here's some of our broad categories, and we try to convey these opportunities to the industry at large. Thanks very much, and I will see you next.